There we go. Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. 2 preseason games done for all 32 teams, and final week of preseason. We get to get into some regular season week 1 action I'm looking forward to talking to. But in the meantime, we've been looking at specific players, and a lot of interesting players for the Titans getting significant snaps in these preseason games.
Yeah, and I think obviously they're not playing major regulars here. Obviously Tannehill's not out there. We know Derrick Henry is not going to take a preseason snap.
I was shocked to see him do team drills today, Greg. It's the first time in like a month. I was disoriented.
I saw that. So I didn't see the drills, but I read that he took team drills.
Yeah.
You're not seeing a lot of certain players, but that's okay. As we've probably discussed in the past, I think teams found out, unfortunately, it was during a pandemic, that you don't necessarily need the preseason in order to prepare for the regular season. Coaches probably disagree, but I think that probably was one byproduct of the pandemic. So I would not expect, you would know better, you're there every day, but I don't think we'll be seeing any regulars for the final preseason game, correct?
I would be surprised. Although Bud Dupree and
they played a lot this week. Yeah,
they played more than Taylor Lewan even got in there for a couple of series. I was surprised by that. But with the players who are playing, Greg, obviously Malik Willis continues to be the focal point as their starting quarterback in these 2 preseason games. Continued growth in practice is what we're seeing, and he's clearly taking the coaching. And I thought there was some nice developments as far as pocket presence, timing, specifically on like a 21-yard throw that he made to Nick Westbrook-Akina early on in the game. There were a couple of good examples that popped to me. I wonder if you saw that same kind of progression.
Yeah, I thought it was still a tough outing for him during the game. I'm obviously not seeing practice.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're working on this with him, but he needs much work on his footwork and his set in the pocket. It's just not clean. It's not precise. So what happens when that's the case is you tend to rush your upper body and your delivery. And what that does as well is everything comes out too hot. He really needs to work on being able to throw with some pace and touch. Another thing that does stand out when you watch tape is he has a tendency to drift off the midline on his drop into the pocket. The result of that, Buck, is that you can often create your own pressure because you're drifting away, you're drifting into your blockers. So you're creating your own pressure. That showed up as well. So he clearly needs work. None of this is a surprise. I'm sure it's not a surprise to the Titans. And the system he played in college was essentially a one-read system, and he still has many of those elements to his game. He doesn't see the field really well yet. So this is a learning process for him. I did read today as we do this that he apparently had a good day. It'll be a process. It will take some time. And obviously the Titans and Titans fans hope that he gets there. But, with those things, you never know. It's just, you hope he does, but you just never know. But he certainly needs to develop more touch and pace on short throws, short to intermediate throws. He throws fastballs.
Right. And it's funny that you bring that up because we're going to talk a little bit about Kenny Pickett later on. And I was watching that Jags-Pittsburgh game, and the description of layering throws that you hear scouts use. I saw a couple of
feathering throws, layering throws, absolutely.
So for people who may not be familiar with the term, because I heard the broadcasters talking about it, and then I saw examples of it when I was watching that game back a little earlier this afternoon. For the audience, though, what does that kind of mean?
Well, keep one thing in mind. Throwing the ball hard and having a power arm, that certainly is a trait. And there are always throws, I shouldn't say always, more often than not, there are throws in games that require good arms, okay? So when people say arm strength doesn't matter, that's an incorrect statement. Is that the number one thing you look for in a quarterback? No, but there are always, as I said, there are often throws in games. It depends on the game. Could be twice, could be 10 times, where the ability to drive the football with velocity does matter. That's not an issue for Malik Willis. He can drive the ball with velocity. I mean, he's got a big time arm. But there are more throws in a game that require some pace, some touch. Because the idea for a quarterback, if you reduce it to simplest terms, Buck, is to throw it to the right receiver with the right kind of throw at the right time. That's what quarterbacking essentially is, if you reduce it to its simplest terms. And not every throw, in fact, most do not require you to throw the ball with great velocity. So, for instance, Kenny Pickett made a throw, which you probably saw, where he was pressured, and he threw it with great timing as well and anticipation, where he just feathered it into the middle of the field over and underneath defender to Pat Fryermuth. Mm-hmm. Now, Malik Willis at this moment in his career would not be ready to make that throw. Pickett is. Pickett's a far more refined and advanced player, which of course is the reason he was the 20th pick in the draft, and one of the reasons Malik Willis fell to the 3rd round. So Pickett has that ability. That's just natural to Pickett. It's not necessarily natural to Malik Willis. He's a he's a fastball pitcher right now.
Yeah, and they're just trying to get as many reps with him ahead of the season. Logan Woodside is playing far less. He's practicing far less. They're trying to get him as many reps as humanly possible to see how ready he could be, but it's likely they'll keep 3 quarterbacks.
Well, here's the deal, which I think you would probably agree. You're there, so you've probably had conversations. I'm not there. But I think if Tannehill, for whatever reason, got hurt, they would really rather Willis be the guy that comes in and plays. And as opposed to Woodside. And taking nothing away from Logan Woodside, don't know the man, maybe he's a super nice guy and all that wonderful stuff, but everybody knows that Logan Woodside is not an NFL starting quarterback. So they would like, if God forbid, Tannehill gets hurt week 3 or whatever, if he has to come out for any meaningful length of time, they want Willis to be the guy who steps in and plays. And based on what you just said, it seems as if that's the direction in which they're moving, giving him far more of the reps.
Yeah, just like right tackle with Nick Petit-Frere. I actually had Willis on the radio show today, Greg, after this is our last day out at training camp practices, and they had some joint work with the Cards. And I just asked him, what's been the biggest transition for you from playing quarterback at Liberty, playing in the NFL? I'm sure there's a million different things. And he basically said, no, it's really the one thing. It's working a huddle. I'm not accustomed to working a huddle. It's been kind of a transition for me. And so from the operations standpoint of the coaching staff, they need him to be more efficient on those kind of things, and they'll work with the physical stuff later.
Yeah. And I think he was, obviously he didn't want to get into every detail, nor should he, but there's other things that are different too. I mean, right now he's not seeing the field particularly well, but he's not used to seeing the field well. This is not his fault. He was not asked to do that in college, and you're going to have to do that in the NFL. So he's just that's a learning process of how to see the field. Just a very quick point. The way that the quarterback position has evolved, beginning when kids start playing at a young age, is they're taught something called pure progression. I'm sure you've heard the term, Buck. Pure progression essentially means that you drop back and there's a progression. In other words, there's a primary receiver, a secondary receiver, then a third receiver. So you drop back and you look at the primary receiver. If he's not open, you just go to the second receiver. If he's not open, you just go to the third receiver. The way it's taught is you don't even need to know about the defense. It doesn't matter why he's not open. He's either open or he's not open. Yeah. So what happens is the large majority of quarterbacks now, as they're taught from a young age, and this is the way 7-7s are, which have overtaken the country. This is the way the position is. They don't get taught about the defense. I had a conversation with an air raid coach the year Jared Goff came out, and he basically said air raid coaches don't teach quarterbacks anything about the defense. So a lot of quarterbacks who are in these sort of air raid type systems, they don't know much about the defense at all. So you have to learn that in the NFL. It's very hard to play quarterback in the NFL without having only a remedial understanding of defense. It's just too hard.
Yeah, no, it's honestly, the thing that comes to mind is this whole conversation that people have been having this offseason with Kyler Murray, and just because he so happens to be in our backyard this weekend.
Right.
Cliff Kingsbury and his style of coaching, like that's the first thing that jumped into my head.
It could be a case. My guess is Kyler Murray is a very smart kid. That would be my guess. Okay. I don't know Kyler Murray, but that would be my guess. But it's just what he's been taught in his life playing the position. He hasn't been taught the position, if you talk to old school coaches, and again, maybe it's just the way the game is going. One can argue what's better, what's worse. That's a different discussion. But the reality is that older, like if you talk to a Mike Martz, okay, who in his day was a true offensive mind and an innovator, he would just rail against the idea of pure progression. Kyle Shanahan, he teaches quarterbacks defense. You have to understand the defense. Because his whole game plans and play calling is based on attacking and breaking down defense. So a lot of these younger and even Cliff Kingsbury, the coach, that's the way he was brought up. He was brought up in the pure progression system. So that's what he knows. So therefore, that's what he teaches.
Yeah, no, it's always interesting to get this, especially those kind of conversations with coaches and the things that are changing and adapting, because there's all constant evolution as far as this stuff is concerned, with how much more competitive and how many more resources are dumped into just the pure preparation of this, and everybody's studying it on a super granular level.
And just one more point before we move on is that's one reason why second reaction skills for quarterbacks have also, that factors in as well, because if you look at one, look at two, and it's all pure progression, you don't like it. If you have the ability to move, then you move, and coaches are okay with that. So, and we're just using Kyler Murray as an example. Like I said, I don't want to make it sound like he doesn't know. It's just what he's been taught. So if he sees 1 and 2 and they're not open, he's got phenomenal ability to make something happen.
Right.
Whereas back in the day, like I was fortunate enough to be taught the position by Bill Walsh. The whole point of Bill Walsh is that there was always an answer for the quarterback to get rid of the ball. Now I think it's a little different. They're okay with a quarterback who's got great movement ability running. A lot of coaches don't view that as a negative anymore. They see that, oh, hey, if you can leave the pocket and run for 12 yards, that's awesome. Let's just do it. Whereas back in the day, if you talk to a Steve Young will tell you that they had the answers to all to the test. The ball, they had the answer with the ball coming out of the quarterback's hand. Bill Walsh would view it as a negative play if the quarterback ended up with the ball.
Yeah. No, it's cool to see, to have both as references, I think, and to kind of see how that's changing and what works and what doesn't.
This is one reason I love football, because I love the concepts of it. Look, we see highlights on, whatever station is, NFL Network, Sports Center on ESPN. And obviously when a quarterback runs for 20 yards, they show that highlight over and over. But is that, it's like that Malik Willis play last week when he got benched, when he should have thrown the ball to Fitzpatrick and then he runs for 17 yards. Would another coaching staff have said, great play, Malik? Obviously the Titans coaching staff did not say that, but would another coaching staff have said that?
It's entirely possible.
Yeah.
I think and then tell the press afterwards they're just out there making a play.
Exactly.
A little more complicated than that.
Right.
For some people. Anyway, you watch both tackles, Petit-Frere and Dillon Radunz. It's my impression that it's Nick Petit-Frere's job at this point, Greg. But I was curious if you saw any difference between Radunz in Baltimore and Radunz against the Bucs.
I thought Radunz had some quality snaps as a run blocker, Buck, but in pass protection, he's got issues. He continues to have significant balance and body control issues, and it's really noticeable. And my sense is if you had to put him out there as a right tackle week 1 against quality pass rushers, he'd have a problem. Whereas I think Petit-Frere, and by the way, I'm not suggesting Petit-Frere will never have a bad snap. He's a rookie.
Right.
So he'll have bad snaps, believe me, but he's a better athlete. He's got lighter feet. He's got better natural lateral movement than Radunz does. He can pull and get outside in the pin pull run game, which is something that they will do, that they've done in the past. Obviously when Derek's there week 1. So Petit-Frere is just a better athlete, and I think he actually looked pretty good in this game. He played the first 2 series at right tackle, then he moved to left tackle. Now he's not going to play left tackle. Obviously, he'd be the right tackle. But I think it, again, not being at camp, just watching the 2 games, I don't think it's a decision if you're just basing it on the 2 preseason games. I don't know what's going on day in and day out. I still believe at some point Dillon Radunz is going to be moved inside somewhere along the line.
Well, it's already happening in practice, but by nature of their he's not going to play right tackle, and that's
Right.
it's beyond. Obviously, there's a larger sample size for the coaching staff and for everybody who does the evaluations on these players than just the 2 preseason games. So that assessment, it would seem, has been the case through these I think almost a month now of training camp
I mean,
practices.
I still believe that, and again, I don't know what Ben Jones' status is contract-wise. I know he's getting to be older. I don't know how the organization sees him. He's obviously a smart, savvy player, all that good stuff, which you want from a center. It would not surprise me if they saw Dillon Radunz down the road as a possible option at center, but I don't know that. But he will not play right tackle in the NFL.
Yeah, well, certainly not for this team in the immediate.
No.
At this point. The corners, McCreary making
Yeah.
his debut, opened up the game with the first stop on special teams. And then it wasn't lost on me, Greg. I talked to Charles Davis about this, that when they came out in their first defensive set, Roger McCreary was on the outside and Caleb Farley later came into the game. I think he's going to start on the outside, but I was curious what you saw from him.
Well, then when they went nickel, I mean, Farley was at, outside and McCreary was in the slot.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what they're going to do here. They're different kinds of players, just body type, size, the way they move.
Technique, I think,
yes,
still at this point.
Yes, for sure. I mean, Farley at times in mirror match press man would get out of phase and lose contact with the receiver, but he again showed that his explosiveness, planting and driving on routes in front of him. They used McCreary on a play just the way they used Molden last year as the 4th rusher in a 4-man, what we call zone exchange pressure concept, meaning that it's only 4 pass rushers, but one of them is the slot corner, and it was McCreary.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a foundation of what the Titans do. So we'll see. That's probably a pretty good battle. Is in your mind Molden going to be the slot corner? How is this going to play out? Do we know?
He didn't practice today. I think if all things were equal, Greg, because of what McCreary is super comfortable doing already on the outside and how good Molden is as a slot player and was down the stretch for them last year, I think that it would be Molden in the slot, McCreary and Fulton on the outside. And they'd probably find ways to get Caleb Farley on the field in different looks. But
so you think right now that McCreary has the edge over Farley?
I almost like the right tackle situation, Greg. I don't necessarily think it's all that close.
Really?
I really don't. I mean, just based on what we see every day, and it's not like I think Farley's made tremendous progress from where he was, but it just Rodgers operating on so much of a higher level, it would seem, and it's certainly not lost on the coaching staff. I really think he's got the edge there.
That's interesting because in an ideal world, given Farley's size, stature, he is a really good athlete, obviously, which again, that doesn't automatically mean you're a great corner.
Right.
He fits the profile far more than McCreary. But as we've discussed, McCreary's tape from his last year in college was outstanding, and he certainly has the traits, the athletic traits. I mean, he is really, really good in mirror match press man, really good at it. Better than Farley at this point.
Yeah.
But Farley's just a bigger man with more explosiveness to his natural movement. And I think in an ideal world, you'd like Farley to be the guy, but the best guy is going to play, and
yeah.
all they can do is go by practice and the games, and the best guy is going to play.
Yeah, and Molden's missing a lot of time. He's been banged up, so that's not insignificant. If that was the case, Farley would be the outside player, and they've been working McCreary a lot inside.
Yeah,
without Molden on the field. But from the 2 in preseason, Greg, what did you see from them specifically, and what was kind of your evaluation of a second sample size of Caleb Farley?
Yeah, well, like I said, I thought there were a few snaps where he would get out of phase and lose contact with the receiver. He got beat on a deep ball to Miller that he dropped. It was a good throw by Kyle Trask, and it should have been caught. He got beat on that. He lost contact. There was another play where the ball was not thrown to his receiver, I don't believe, and he lost contact as well at the top of the route stem. So, again, he's got great physical traits, great size, but he needs some technique work. He needs some work with his eyes. Whereas I think McCreary is probably a little more advanced in those areas. So then you have to decide, given McCreary's size, is how how does he match up to quote unquote bigger receivers? And I guess that remains to be seen. But I think that McCreary is a little more refined right now in how he plays the position. So we'll see how it plays out. I don't know what they'll do in their final preseason game. I would assume both might play. Obviously in that final preseason game, you certainly don't want anybody to get hurt.
Right.
So we'll see what they do, but they probably feel like it's a good situation to be in. One thing about Farley, though, and I know this means something to Mike Vrabel, is he gives a ton of effort as a run defender. Now, that's, again, you're looking for your corners to be coverage players, but Farley, because he's got some size, he's aggressive and competitive as a run defender.
Yeah, no, definitely something that this coaching staff values. Greg, there's a lot of different players for the Titans, or really there's been a certain focus on the players that we've talked about for the Titans, but there's been a lot of guys that I've enjoyed watching the preseason throughout the course of these first couple of games. Kenny Pickett against Trevor Lawrence. I know Mitch Trubisky started, but Kenny Pickett and the Steelers versus the Jags, and Trevor Lawrence playing a lot of football in this, I think was really enjoyable for me to kind of see where both of those teams are with their quarterbacks. But Pickett in particular kind of popped for me in my first larger sample size of seeing him since college tape.
Yeah, well, Pickett going back to college and seeing him through his first 2 preseason games, Buck, he just has the look and feel of an NFL quarterback. He's poised, he's composed. I mean, he executed that 2-minute drill flawlessly. I think he got the ball with 1:05 remaining and 2 timeouts, and he led them to a touchdown. He made that big time throw, which we mentioned earlier, to Freiermuth in the face of inside blitz pressure from Chad Muma. And again, that was a timing and anticipation throw, touch, pace, and ball placement. It was a veteran throw. I mean, obviously it's preseason, but it's still, you're isolating the quarterback and you're seeing the kind of throw. And I think Pickett can do that. And I think Pickett has really good fundamental technique throwing the ball. Obviously he does not have a gun, but he strikes me as one of those guys because the technique is so good that the ball comes out really well. I mean, the term that a lot of people like to use is sequencing. His sequencing from his lower half to his upper half is really good. And that's not going to change. Now, he does have movement ability. He's probably not a guy that's going to make a lot of off-platform throws. That's where the smaller hands might come into play. He's probably not going to make sidearm throws and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know if you need to do that in the NFL. I mean, that's, we get caught up in the fact that Patrick Mahomes does it all the time. And obviously you see that on the highlight, shows all the time. I don't know if that's necessary to play quarterback at a higher level, but I think Pickett will be the starter, if not week 1, sooner than later.
Yeah, no, it certainly seems, just reading some reports coming out of Pittsburgh, that it does feel like that is going to be the case. Are you through 2 games now and watching some Trevor Lawrence and understanding that there's a lot of things that we are not seeing for what the Jags are going to do on offense this year? Are you seeing him kind of work through some of these habits that he may have developed in his rookie year that they're trying to kind of break him of?
Yeah, I mean, to me, watching the tape from this past week, I thought it looks as if they're working on shortening his stride and becoming more compact with his delivery. But there's certainly still throws when he has to pick up his tempo, and the way he's thrown his whole life then comes back where his stride gets lengthened with a longer delivery. They'll keep working on that with him. I still think he shows some ball placement issues. I think that needs, to continue to be worked on. He made some really good throws. He had Kirk for 22 yards on a 3rd down in the second quarter. Really good read, really good throw. And the Steelers actually disguised their coverage, and Lawrence clearly saw it and made the throw. He was decisive. He was accurate. I think his processing, what I call elimination isolation, needs to continue to improve. It's a new offense. He's starting over. And, look, he's obviously the starting quarterback. That's not the question, but I still think there'll be some ups and downs early in the season with Trevor Lawrence as he sort of gets acclimated to a new offense. And a lot of the things they're working on, sometimes you'll see it in a positive way, and other times it won't quite work out that way.
Yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting samples or case study to watch Jacksonville, I think, throughout the course of this season. Greg, when next we talk, the preseason will be done, and we'll be starting to talk about week 1 games and all the excitement of another NFL regular season. I can't wait, buddy.
No, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, if truth be told, I'm just looking forward to this final week of preseason to be over, Buck, you know.
I was talking to my friend Laura Oakman from Fox today. She's got Titans Giants week 1.
Oh, so she was around today?
She was around today, and there was a similar vibe about the preseason and where we kind of all are in it. But thank you as always.
We have to talk about it, but then you can look at individual players. I mean, that's really what preseason is. But, you know, as far as schemes and tactics, you know, which I enjoy so much about the game, there's not a lot there.
No, and we'll start to have more, you know, informed and learned football here in a couple of weeks, and it'll be a great time. Thank you as always, Greg.
Thanks, Buck.